Like that was the biggest double standard I was expecting to hear because I think that's the most blatant one.
And then a guy should be giving on Valentine's Day. Okay, that's an obvious double standard. But when you start adding more and more people into the equation, unless you know everybody's
What if
thoughts on
what
this,
if what if she's giving out sex?
On this week's episode of the Infusion Breakdown Show, the Breakdown crew sat down among ourselves to discuss the hypocrisy of double standards and if they hold any validity. Let's see what we come up with.
before we get started on today's episode, I'd like to introduce to you our Black-owned Business of the Week, where we showcase quality Black-owned businesses for you to support every week. This week's business is Sauces and Seasons by Marissa Gray. Sauces and Seasons specializes in Caribbean flavors infused with spices of Grenada, with authentic pepper sauce and even sea moss teas. Be sure to visit their Etsy shop and check out their selection.
So the question we have for today: do double standards impede progress, or is it how we perceive fairness? Comment below. Let us know your opinion. We also have timestamps in the description below. As always, be sure to check them out. Um, I thought about this topic with the 14th day in February coming up, and I kind of threw it in there as a rush fourth question in the list I sent you guys when you no, not when you was asking us to think of questions. When I just sent you guys a list of questions, so after thinking about it, it could be actual end round question, but I started thinking about the double standards that goes on in society. And after thinking about them, I started thinking about how people deem them as unfair, and that made me think about how people perceive fairness. Uh, so it made me think of this question: do double standards actually impede progress, or is it how we perceive fairness? In other words, do we make double standards bad because we perceive fairness in a certain way? Um, like there's things that go on in the Middle East that we as Americans would consider a double standard for their women, but those women in those countries perceive that as fair because that's just how they grew up. That's the culture they're in. So that's really how it came about. Was that the same question you guys were keen to?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
that was my understanding of it.
Okay. Yeah. I'm interested to hear what you guys thought about it, or if you guys went completely different from what I was thinking, or what exactly.
I was more prepared for this to be a discussion where I took a more of a listening role to react to that because my thoughts, I don't really have specific thoughts on individual double standards, but I think I wanted to see what you guys wanted to, where you wanted to take the conversation first.
Same.
I kind of I'm not gonna say I took the same position as Brian, but I wanted to at least see like where you were steering us first, so I know the correct response because I definitely think just from the question itself that it impedes fairness, but I wanted to understand the second half of your argument because it comes from somewhere.
Well,
Like
yeah, like I said, I think it was a quick question that I just threw in there, so I wasn't. So, like I said, it could definitely be an around question, but how I really looked at it was I think that our perception of fairness impede progress, and that leads to the double standards. And the problem is we make the majority's perception the rule in society, while the minority is usually shunned upon. Uh, and instead of setting an unbiased lens on fairness, we make and making that the rule of law, we use our biased opinions to create that. So that's really how I felt about it. That our actual fairness impedes progress, and that leads to the double standards. Do you agree with that? And I was also trying to look up if double standard was a perception also.
so you're saying our perception of fairness impedes progress
Yes.
as a possibility.
Yes.
Um, I'd have to like see what our. I mean, if you're looking at fairness from the perspective of what you said, to where fairness and all its glory is only truly defined by that of a ruling class and doesn't represent the desires of the minority working class, then yes, it can impede progress because it just continues to create like a bigger gap or divide as far as understandings. It broadens the ignorance, and I say that because ignorance was the first thing I thought of when you gave your example of how um, women in Middle Eastern countries aren't afforded the same rights as men. But I would say that like that's just ignorance on our behalf of not understanding what their perspective of fairness, whether it be based off of religion or rule of law, we're not really the most understanding of why. Not to say that it's okay, but just to use ignorance in its, in its form or its truest form. Like I would say that that's like a bit of ignorance on our end, trying to compare apples to oranges when we really don't know why things are the way they are there, whether it be religious rule or, it's just their view that women are inferior, anything of that nature.
Okay. Are double standards necessary?
I would
should men and women be treated differently and held to a different standard?
No, definitely. I feel like they should. So, do I think double standards can be good? No, just because from what I understand, when I was in school for political science and pre-law, there is no room in law, even though we now see there is like, how can I say this without, in law, there is supposed to be no such thing as a double standard. Everybody is everyone is looked at within the eyes of the law as the same. The judge is supposed to remain impartial and rule based on the law itself. However, we've seen recently, like if you want to factor in like the double standard when it comes to rioting versus looting, whereas the people that stormed the Capitol, a lot of them are being granted, the ability to fly to another country for what is deemed a necessary business meeting. But you would see that with the Black Lives Matter protests weren't even incited by people of Black Lives Matter, but yet that negative stigma is still tied to what is supposed to be something of a greater purpose and a greater good. So in that case, like, it's clear as day that the double standard is there. And it's not only there in how we view race relations, but it's there in how the law interprets race relations as well. That it still favors a majority versus a minority, which we all know, but to provide an example.
You said men and women should be treated differently?
No.
So
I was answering the question how I wanted to, not necessarily answering the question to your particular response. So I do think that men and women, regardless of sexual orientation, whatever they may choose to identify as far as gender or whatever it may be, like I feel like they need to be held to the same standard, because there is no second set of laws to govern these people. So because there is no second set of laws to govern people based off of their choices, you have to identify them as such. You have to identify that they deserve the same rights and liberties that you do.
Okay.
And of course, if you create that second set of laws, like, because you're not able to create a second set of laws for, the governing body versus, or you're going to say the majority versus the minority, if you create that second set, it creates like favoritism. So double standards is just favoritism without, it's blatantly obvious. I would say double standard at one point was maybe supposed to be favoritism without being blatantly obvious, but regardless of what you look at it, whether you're making a decision based off of race or how you feel about a person, it's some form of favoritism or bias.
Okay, so double standards are basically a thing because we make it a thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Always.
For them. Yeah, because there are some people that will just sit back. That would just identify something as that's the way it is. If you choose not to identify it as the way it is, and you choose to, speak out on it or let your voice be heard, then it creates, or it sets a standard of what you will allow versus what you won't allow. What mistreatment you allow versus what mistreatment you won't allow. And it's typically always done off of a comparison of, look at how you're treating this person versus how I'm being treated. Even if Valentine's Day is right around the corner, like you said, when we were younger, and maybe some women still look at this way, as we get older, but there's that comparison aspect of what people receive from their significant others for Valentine's Day, or they put the value of how much that significant other may love you based off of the amount of material, tangible goods you'll receive on Valentine's Day, stuff like that.
Are you saying Valentine's Day is a double standard?
No, because I've been in relationships when Valentine's Day has come around, and I've received as much as I've given. Like, I think that's just, if you were to look at it from a double standard or a point of a double standard, I think your situation would be unique to the person you're dating.
Okay.
That's my problem with double standards as a whole, because I feel like a lot of when I see them put into practice is typically in social media exchanges or conversations with people, and it's like we predicate a lot of the thoughts of an opposing group onto someone else. So you'll say one thing, and by you saying that one thing, we'll match it with an idea that contrasts that, but it may not necessarily be something that you accurately believe. So I was just looking at a few examples of like double standards, and I think I found this really nice article that somebody had wrote on Quora. And so like one of them was, okay, so this is a nice one. A man commanding people around, he's assertive in the workplace, but a woman commanding people in the same fashion is bossy. So a person could say one half of that and not say the other part. They could possibly not even believe that, but they'll put the contrasting idea and say, okay, well, if she was a woman, or if she was a man, or if he was a woman, they'll add that other side of the argument there when it doesn't exist for that person. So it's the same as you saying that a black person should be treated a certain way in a situation, and then I say, well, if they were white, you would be saying the same thing. So it's like me putting words and thoughts into you and building a straw man for an argument. So it's really difficult to have discussions when it comes to double standards unless you know both sides of the person's beliefs, how you believe this should happen in one situation, how you believe it should happen in another one. Otherwise, I'm just making things up and then trying to pin you to a wall with, like I said, a straw man argument. But I do think when it comes to double standards, they irritate me personally because I don't like being a hypocrite. Like if I say something, I like to abide by that as well. It's just it just makes me uncomfortable. But I do think that.
Have you ever did any, or not fault victim, but have you ever showed off any double standards to someone that you didn't realize until somebody came up to you, was like, Brian, that's a double standard, like what are you doing? And you didn't realize it? Or you was ignorant to it?
Yes. I wouldn't say in the sense that we are speaking, I guess, in terms of like law or anything, but in I guess interpersonal relationship, it's like I wanted honest, open communication, but there were certain things that, I mean, I wasn't lying, but I wasn't doing the best to articulate myself and share my thoughts and be as open with the other person. So that was an example of a double standard. And I see how foolish that was and how ridiculous it was for me to think and expect that from someone else when I wasn't producing that myself. And as a consequence, I changed my behavior. So that's my take on that. So what was your, did you have more questions about that?
No, not about that. I was just gonna ask you, so do you don't think double standards are necessary at all?
I think double standards, a lot of them are socially constructed, and then I guess other ones not so much. Like just the nature of human beings, we all have different experiences, and we're equal in the amount of, like, we have an innate human value, but each of us have a different set of challenges that we're presented with in life. Like, for example, I think about the discussion we had about T.I. and his daughter about parenting. And so with that, like on the episode, I talked about the difference between parenting a teenage boy that gets a girl pregnant and then the opposite. And there's obvious biological differences. There are obvious different challenges that one faces. And just to reiterate for the people who may not have seen the episode, so as a parent of a teenage girl that gets pregnant, you have to be concerned about whether the child is going to have both parents in the child's life. But as a father of a teenage son, if your son does get a girl pregnant, you don't have to worry about things like that. And that's a very real consideration. Like that's a biological constraint. And we can't say that's a social construct, because that's just something that is, it is like you never really have to worry about these things from a mother's perspective, because the child is always with them. Not saying you should lock your daughters down or anything like that. So, I mean, I'm just saying that just because things have the tendency to be misconstrued, but I'm saying that sometimes double standards are rooted in some good intention, and from there in execution, they may be played out in ways that are disproportionate or just outright incorrect.
So you're saying it's okay to have a little bit more restrictions on the girl than the boy that you're raising, or did I?
No, I'm saying,
Okay.
I'm saying you should understand why. How do people? So I like to think about how do people arrive to conclusions,
Mhm.
and that's the most sensible line of thinking when trying to break down how does somebody arrive to that, into saying, okay, that you'll let your 17-year-old son out to stay out this long, and then you won't let your 17-year-old daughter. Okay, well, I think that in those instances it should be really based on the child as an individual, really, because children are more like, you might have one child that's more responsible than the other. Okay, fine, but just strictly on the basis of the child's gender, saying that it's a girl, it's a boy, no. But you do also have to acknowledge and equip the child differently, because boys and girls have different experiences growing up. Like the way that your son will experience the world is very different from the way your daughter will. So of course, like the obvious thing is education, and I mean you can educate them. That's ideal, but I'm saying that the exact contents of the education is gonna differ. It's like everybody doesn't have the same set of things. It's like kind of like different. It's for like Black people. Like our parents, they impute us with knowledge about how to navigate and work with like law enforcement, for example. That's something that white children may not be educated on as much. The white parents might not care about that. Is that a double standard? Okay, it's a difference. Why might that be? Okay, that's because I don't want to say the world we live in, but it kind of is. And there's definitely, we've seen this thing play out, like with Trayvon Martin, with Mike Brown, with Tamir Rice. We've seen things like that, and not saying it doesn't happen to white folks at all, because of course there's always a counterpoint that somebody can just present, but just saying it's more prominent of a thing in the Black community for us to worry about. We have to be more careful when engaging with law enforcement and people like that. So it's just saying that our experiences shape and inform the way that we should be educated, and not everybody has the same set of challenges. So I don't think double standards are entirely just made up. Because if so, why would we teach our Black kids about how to interact with law enforcement? It's made up.
Who said it was made up?
I'm saying, like, people under the banner of saying everything is a social construct. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that you're saying this, but if that is the idea, mm-hmm, of that double standards are truly non-existent and there's something that we just made up, then why? Just provoking the thought. I wasn't necessarily asking you the question.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not Joshua Friedman.
Okay. You think Valentine's Day is a double standard?
I agree with Desmond. I see from a marketing standpoint, the commercials are more geared towards the woman receiving the gifts, but in a lot of relationships, I would say that it's equal. I would say that we have a skewed perspective, maybe just because of our experiences, maybe because what we see, but if you actually were to talk with other people and expand your perspective a little bit more, you would see that. So I really don't think it, like, by default, it doesn't have to be. I don't think there's anything that's a part and parcel of Valentine's Day to where it has to be a double standard where it's unequal, where one party receives it and the other doesn't. If that's how they choose to behave, then that's a consequence of their beliefs themselves, not the holiday.
Okay. But you just said the marketing though is more geared towards women though. I don't really see a lot of commercials about men receiving stuff on Valentine's Day, even though there are people nowadays that would reciprocate that and do give men at least something on Valentine's Day.
I agree. I've never seen a Kay Jewelers commercial for a woman getting a guy a necklace or anything like that. But I'm saying also with that being said, like the advertising and the marketing, you still have your own independent train of thought. You don't have to abide by what you see in marketing. I don't think that you do. And I'm saying that applies to other individuals as well. I do see how, and one thing about like with double standards, like they suffer from scope creep, so you kind of have to like look at them isolated cases. So in the instance to where somebody does have those beliefs where a woman feels like she should be receiving strictly, and then a guy should be giving on Valentine's Day, okay, that's an obvious double standard. But when you start adding more and more people into the equation, unless you know everybody's
what if she's giving out sex? What if
If
what
she's
if
giving us sex.
what if the reward is sex? Is it okay then?
That's a good question.
What do you think, Des?
I would say no, because I mean that's nothing like if you're having sex normally, that's not like anything super special. But I mean I can't really dictate and speak on other people's relationships. Like if it's like the whole thing about a relationship is two people and they have an agreement of sorts, and so you're constantly negotiating the terms. So it's like I can't really say that this isn't okay, because if that's something that they choose to abide by, they have that level of understanding. Then
Okay, if we put out a poll though for all the guys watching this, and we ask them, would you guys rather receive gifts or sex on Valentine's Day? What do you think the majority is gonna say?
I really don't know. I could see cause for both answers.
Okay,
What do you think?
sex, dude.
But I'm saying like if you're regularly sexually active, like that's why I say I can see the argument for gifts. It's like I always get that you can say, okay, what's different?
I understand what you're saying, but I don't really see. I feel like a lot of people aren't as sexually active in a relationship. Maybe I'm thinking more of marriage, but I feel like they're not as sexually active as you think. Like they don't get it as every couple doesn't get it as numerous, like constant as you think. That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So they feel that day is more of a, okay, this is the day where I know I can definitely get some sex if I buy her stuff. You know what I mean?
Okay. Like I said, I see cause for both answers of saying either the gifts or the sex.
Okay. What do you
Because
think?
if something is normative, then
Nah, I'm gonna stick solely with what strongly, not even solely, just strongly what, you know, Josh said. I mean, not what Brian said. Like, if you have a active sex life, like you don't even have to have sex, you know, numerous times a week, but I mean, you can have sex outside of February 14th, so it doesn't make it special. If that's the case, you would have a whole bunch of, you know, November babies. Everybody would be born in November.
I didn't say everybody gets the reward that is sex. I'm saying they hope for that. They hope for sex.
Because there's too many factors. It's too many factors for you to hope.
What do you mean exactly?
Well, you got to make sure it's not that time of the month. You got to make sure she had a good day at work. If the people have been pissing her off, then it's likely not going to happen. It's that time of the month.
But usually
you know.
Valentine's Day is usually a tradition. Like they know February 14th at the end of the day, we get our dinner, you get the chocolates, everything like that, and then bada bing, bada boom after dinner. You know what I mean?
bro,
So-
periods don't care.
No, I'm not. I wasn't talking about period. I was talking about everything else she was talking about as far as like her day. Like I feel like if she knows she's getting presents, chocolates, and flowers, wine, everything on Valentine's Day, you're not thinking about how you were at work. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. You don't think so?
No. Bro, we grown, man. What the hell is, yo, I understand that women do like gifts, things that show gratitude or things to, you know, show that you care. Like I get stuff like that, but like I don't buy it. I don't buy it for the whole Valentine's Day. You know, if Valentine's Day is the only day you're getting your shorty, you know, chocolates and flowers and sex for that matter, like then you're just not doing a whole bunch of stuff right.
Facts.
I agree, but at the same time, are you just gonna do that anytime you want sex or anytime? Like,
No, because then that's essentially a bribe system that you have. You're bartering. Like, okay, I'll give you this.
That's how a lot of guys
for-
feel, though. That's how a lot of guys feel.
It's not even, it's manipulation. We'll just put
It is.
we'll call it for what it is. It's manipulation. It's you identifying ways to get what it is you want and exploiting it.
You feel a lot of guys do that though?
I think a lot of guys and women alike do it. Women know
Yeah,
how to get what
yeah.
they want.
We both manipulate each other.
I mean, of course. I'm just talking about from a guy's perspective because I don't want to assume anything about women since none of us are women in this podcast right now.
It would be assuming about women if you weren't dealing with women. An assumption I think is based off of just the inability to observe and respect the perspectives. If you can observe and respect the perspective, then you can essentially narrow down what it is that makes people do what they do. I'm not going to sit here and speak with the confidence of why women do what they do, but I'm not going to say as a man we don't possess the ability to think or inquire why they do what they do. They do the same thing for us. Why do men do this? Why do boys act a certain way? Why do they do this? Like when is the growth or when is the maturity coming for men? Like we do the same thing, just as they do the same thing for us.
And those are good conversations or thoughts to have when it comes to the idea of developing generalizations. But if it comes to like developing a tried and true rule, I think it's a little bit more difficult, because when you make statements like this, like saying, why do women want this or why do women do this, then okay, you're removing any room for any difference from that. So you're saying that's the standard, and so anything that happens that's against that, you don't ascribe to. It's a rigid framework.
Okay.
One thing I was thinking I was gonna hear was the double standard that I'm not sure if you guys hear it or if it's just something that I heard a lot in my household, but I think the biggest double standard that a lot of Black youth hear is the whole 10 times better than double standard, where you have to be 10 times as good or 10 times better than, someone who has done the same amount of work as you, but is of a different race or whatever, to get the same that, they be receiving with less the experience or something along those lines. Like that was the biggest double standard I was expecting to hear, because I think that's the most blatant one, having to be 10 times better, than your white counterpart to get the same that they're receiving.
You thought we was gonna mention that?
Yeah, because I feel like that's the most common one that I can remember. Like when I first look at the question,
Gotcha.
and I identify a double standard, like the first thing that doesn't come to my mind is like, the whole men versus women double standards that we oftentimes are like suckered into. Like when I think of it, I think of like, what's the most common ones that actually have weight and validity? Whereas the men versus women is solely a perspective based or experience based, double standard argument in itself. Like this is one that everyone has in some way, shape or form, come in contact with, whether it be hearing it from their parents or just seeing someone like a counterpart that they know they work harder than achieving something that,
Do you believe
achieving
that's
the same goal.
necessary? You believe that's
No.
necessary? No?
No, because it's like one of those things to where it's essentially saying you carry the burden of stress, carry twice the amount of burden of stress, or 10 times, the burden of stress for the peanuts that you're given. Like that's not a necessary thought process at all. Like you're essentially you're creating fertile breeding ground for people to go into that cycle of, paycheck to paycheck, or being this completely giving person and not knowing how to receive anything. Like you're stripping people of their identity when you say, hey, you need to be 10 times better than you were yesterday to get to where you need to be. Like I think it's good motivation and tactics, but I'm
about to say, some people would say that it's good motivation. Like it'll help them in the long run, motivation wise.
Motivation is made up of what it is though. Like if you have to motivate somebody to do something, then chances are that's not what they want to do. Like if you have somebody that is supposed to be fulfilling their quote unquote personal legend, they're going to make those gradual steps to achieve that, regardless of time.
Okay.
I think it'd be better to teach children that time is of the essence, and what you do with that time is going to, create the lifestyle that you want. But to say that you have to be 10 times better, what exactly am I being 10 times better than?
Your white counterpart.
But you don't even know how good they are. So
And
what
that
am I
becomes your own
being?
purpose.
Hey,
Like
say again?
that becomes your purpose. You're focusing
Hey,
on what somebody else is doing to dictate what you do, as opposed to focusing on yourself.
exactly.
And you're also already putting them ahead of you from the
Right.
start, from the
Facts.
get-go, even though they
I think
did absolutely nothing to get there.
I think having that belief itself is limiting. Like I have heard that when I was younger. I don't remember who said it, or I definitely heard conversations and have been
Why do
exposed to that idea.
Why do you say it's limiting?
It's limiting because you're telling somebody what they're going to experience before they experience it. Like if I tell you exactly, like I think a better way to go about that is to tell and educate you, let's say like as a black man, or myself as a black man to a son. I would tell him about the challenges that he may face, but I can't say for 100% certainty that this is always going to be that, because that's going to shape his perspective, and kind of it's going to skew any kind of experiences he has through that lens strictly, instead of him being able to look at things on a case-by-case basis and evaluate them. And then also what I just said about you worrying about other people too is a criteria. You're always looking over your shoulder as opposed to like keeping your head straight. It's like like when you're running track. Whenever you start looking over your shoulder, that's when you start losing.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Okay. Cool. But yeah, I just had those two questions. The follow-up questions as far as if double standards are actually necessary and if Valentine's Day was a double standard. But yeah, I wasn't actually thinking about the double standards about being black, because I know we talked about we had a lot of black conversations lately, so I just kind of pushed that to the forefront. And I was thinking about
Or
Valentine's
to
Day too.
whitewash it.
You said what?
So
Did you
want
say
to-
whitewash?
I
Whitewash
said,
it?
did you want to whitewash it?
But yeah, but yeah, that's all I have as far as double standards though. Did you guys have anything? You have anything?
Yes, for you specifically. Are double standards ever valid? And if so, could you provide me an example of one?
Are they ever valid? You're basically asking me, are they necessary?
No. Are they ever valid? I'm not asking are they necessarily, do we need all double standards?
You calling me? Anyway, my bad. Are they valid? Nothing I can think of. No double standards I can think of right off the bat are good enough as far as like to be valid. Nothing I can think of. No.
Okay, let me read you this, because I'm gonna say no, but let me read you what I'm reading right now. So it says, and actually, I don't even want to read you that one. I want to read you a different one. Where's it at? All right, I might just read you that one. I can't remember where I saw that. All right, so it says a double standard is an application of different sets of principles for situations that are in principle the same. It's often described by the way we treat with da 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 da. That's not what I wanted to read to you, God. And we need like somebody that when we like see something but we can't say it at the time, we can pass it to them, and then they just slide it back to us. Like, yo, remember you wanted to talk about this?
I mean, we do have a chat feature here.
Yeah, but I'm on my phone, man. Y'all don't want to see me up here like just seeing my fingers.
he has to like go in and look at it.
Okay.
I don't
Right
would say they're valid though. No.
This is what I wanted to read to you if you were having that discrepancy between the two, of like truly wanting to say if they were valid or not. It says double standards are believed to develop in people's minds for the multitude of possible reasons, including finding an excuse for oneself, emotions clouding judgment, twisting facts to support beliefs such as confirmation biases, cognitive biases, attraction biases, prejudice, or desire to be right. Human beings have a tendency to evaluate the actions of people and then interact with them based on who did them.
Yeah.
So your answer is no. Yeah, I'm not a fan of double standards at all myself either. I can see justification, like I said with the earlier one, trace like the path that the person took to arrive to them. But I try to evaluate things on a case by case basis and say, okay, well, if I was in this person's shoes, or I try to look at it from that standard.
Yeah, I mean,
Kind of like the categorical imperative, you know?
I wonder, do we have any? I'm starting to think that even though we're denying it, like we don't believe, I'm not sorry, not denying it. We're saying that we don't believe, double standards can ever be valid. I would challenge y'all to actually this week, at random, think about some things you may like. Just catch yourself in the cuffs of having this thought, and then stop it right there. Reason why I say that is because when we had the biases conversation, I had came out and pretty much said like, I can't even think about any of my conscious biases, but I have a bunch of subconscious biases, like things that I'm not presently thinking about or identifying as like a bias, but I will catch myself as I'm having a negative thought of some sort and be like, damn, there's my bias right there. So even though we're saying like there's like double standards we don't believe are valid, I'm pretty sure that as we do things throughout the week, we're going to identify a bunch of double standards that we don't consciously view as a double standard, but is a double standard. And then we have the question of validity of that thought or that action. Reason being is because like when we had the bias conversation, and this is the only reason why I'm challenging this like as an experiment, I had got off the call with a disgruntled client, and I was like, man, I really hate entitled white people. I have a very, very strong bias against those people. I've dealt with plenty of other self-righteous people that are Black, Hispanic, Indian, but I never feel some type of way about them. But it's like when I get on the phone call and I have that self-righteous white person, it triggers something. And I only ever realize it when it's triggered. But it is it's an unconscious bias because it's not just when that situation triggers that I feel that way. That's a feeling that I have, I'm not gonna say permanent, but it's an active feeling that I have. And when triggered, I'm able to display a full range of emotions based off of that. It's not something new. It's something that I felt before and I know how to react to it. I also know how to, of course, react in a positive way to it. But like, it's just a challenge of saying, hey, I might be pretty damn near perfect by saying I don't have any valid double standards, but I'm pretty sure there is some there that we can find.
You're saying double standards that we ascribe to personally.
Yeah.
Unconsciously or subconsciously.
Yeah.
Huh.
Like there's none that I can think of right now. Like I think it would be like elementary level ones like speeding or something like that. But I'm almost positive there's one that we have that we don't really know about until we catch ourselves in that thought real time.
I would say, you mentioned speeding. I'll probably say when I'm slowing down, like when I'm behind somebody that is going slow, I'm like, what the fuck? Go faster. What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, you don't got nowhere to be. That's what I'm like. I'm pissed off. But when I'm going slow, I'm like, oh, is it the word? Like, you just
get on my ass. Yo, like, get off my ass.
Like, what the word? Right. So yeah, that's one right there. Especially when you mention elementary. But yeah, it's interesting thinking of like just random double standards that you, especially small ones, because you don't really think about the small ones, but yeah, they're definitely important too.
Like, I mean, even then, I think another unconscious bias of like the elementary level is, another conversation we had last week, I believe it was, when we were talking about The Rock. And I was like, for me to look at another Black man and say, hey, I don't see myself in you based off of my perspective of what, Black is, like that's a bias in itself. So if it's like, maybe I have a bias against Black men who don't, what's the word?
Fit the mold.
Don't follow, you fit the mold per se. But then the mold is my perspective of itself. So like the validity of it isn't too strong. It's just what my experiences have molded in itself.
That took a tremendous amount of maturity to acknowledge both of those biases that you had with the coworker and then the situation from last week's discussion. Because I mean, I identified the second one. It's like you were putting somebody else into a mold that didn't really exist. It's like, what is a Black man?
Yeah. Big facts.
but that's why perception is everything, though. Really. Especially when it comes to something like double standards. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I'll agree with Brian though, like as far as like when you receive something, to start from the back and then move forward as far as like looking at the conclusion and how you got there. Because I'll say like perspective is everything, but what you do with that perspective and how you choose to, you know, assert it, that's everything. Like I'd much rather have somebody that is only able to look at something from one perspective and subscribe to it, rather than having someone have multiple perspectives and not knowing what to do with any of them.
Okay.
Like as far as like an enlightenment phase, like I would much rather somebody you know be 100% gung ho with what they believe in, rather than you know somebody having the ability to inspire and you know do so much more through the multiple perspectives of life that they have, you know, not do anything with it. Because it doesn't even have to be like we keep as a society keep thinking that like, hey, if we can't touch you know 20 million people, then our you know our product isn't worth it. But like you can inspire your you know younger sibling or even older sibling or your parents by just capitalizing on that perspective aspect. And you know, I mean, I can tell you straight up, like my dad and I have grown closer by learning to respect, you know, the multiple perspectives that each party might have, whether in right or wrong. So you know, the ability to look at it is everything. But the actual execution is what's going to matter.
Yeah. What do you have any double standards that you can think of, Brian? Or do you want to take more time to think of them?
I'm gonna need more time, but of course I do. I'm not gonna be that daft to say that I don't have any double standards. Like we're, as much as we like to think that we're rational people and we have strict moral compasses that we abide by, and to the best of our ability, I think we do. There's still going to be something that we overlook, and we're not going to be perfect.
Yeah, I think the main thing is just realizing that it is a double standard, whether it's in that instance or later on down the road. Because even when I'm like behind somebody, I realize like, oh shoot. Sometimes I realize I'm like, oh shoot, I'm a little bit too close to this person. I need to back off because I wouldn't want this to happen to me. So a lot of times, like realization, like, oh, what am I doing is like what Desmond said. He realized that he shouldn't put The Rock in this type of box because that's his perception of things. So yeah, I think a lot of it is realization too, like realizing like, oh, this is a double standard. So, but I mean, and then taking it from there. But yeah,
I think empathy goes a long way, or compassion, or the combination of the two goes a long way of defeating double standards. Because even with the silly example you're saying, you riding somebody's bumper in traffic, or with the example of speeding, it's like it's very easy to, let's say like the other day in traffic, it's supposed to be like 20 minutes for me to get Chesapeake, and it took me damn near an hour because traffic was that bad. And so I could have been impatient, but then I stopped to think that at the other end of this traffic pile, somebody could potentially be fighting for their life. And I was in, like, to the average person, they're ignorant of that. We don't know that. And so just by thinking that and saying, okay, let's say if I was on the opposite end of the spectrum, if I was the person in that car, what am I concerned about? The traffic backed up for 3 or 4 miles, or am I more concerned about trying to live? So it really put that in perspective for me. And that's something, like, particularly with traffic, that's something I always think about, is to level set and kind of take a step back to assess what's actually going on. And I guess that goes a long way with understanding. And I guess that could even be applied to things like with the speeding. It's like, you don't know why the person's driving slow. They could have been distraught, had a long day. Somebody could just died or something like that. So it's just like, we never know what exactly somebody else is going through. And I think that goes a lot to being double standards.
Yeah, I agree. I think the first thing I usually do is look at the license plate, see if there's a handicap thing up there. Like, okay, if it's a handicap, like, okay, I gotta chill. They just a handicapped person, they old person. Like,
what if it's a Florida tag?
Is it a Florida tag?
Yeah.
Run into their bumper. Like, get the fuck out of the road. No, I'm kidding. Fuck the people from Florida. No, I'm playing. Yeah. That I was just curious about the whole topic that is double standard stuff. But yeah. Anything else you guys want to add though?
This is something.
Tags, man.
Say it again.
I got Florida tags, man.
this is something I could definitely see us revisiting in the future as we take more time to think about this and have some more concrete examples.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I'm surprised we didn't probably touch on double standards before. Maybe we did or something at one point. Not that whole topic, but somebody mentioned it at some point. But yeah, I thought it would be interesting, especially with Valentine's Day coming up. And it's just one of those thoughts I was thinking about, like when I'm like in bed or when I'm like at work, just randomly think like, oh shoot, so yeah. But that's all you guys have?
Yes, sir.
Got album of the week or book of the week?
Nah, I ain't got nothing for y'all today, man. Y'all been sucking me dry. Pause. I ain't got nothing else to provide y'all, man. I gotta have an album every week. Nah, I'm playing. Let's see. We took a road trip up to Alexandria, Arlington over the weekend. We played Tribe Called Quest. We played Kid Cudi. We played Jay-Z. So instead of album of the week, we'll give you artists of the week. Things that my playlist was compiled of. It's not gonna be one because I went through multiple albums. There've been albums that I presented before. So I guess we'll say my album of the week would be I Am. I think that's Nas's third album. I think I've ever had that as album of the week. But Nas is Like is yes sir. But Nas is Like is one of my favorite Nas tracks ever. So
the beginning and end, as far as rap go, it's only natural. Alrighty. Alright. If you guys like the discussion, don't forget to hit the like button. We're gonna see you guys next week. Peace.
But while you're here, be sure to check out other great content from the Breakdown crew, including previous episodes of the podcast, Joshua vs. Movies, Joshua vs. Music, and of course, haven't forgotten about my plant lovers, Feel the Love. Just check out this begonia.